Hey guys, welcome to my channel. As you can see the thumbnail, what if Issei become a book-eating magician part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe to my channel, and also watch previous stories. Let's start the video. Most people love their parents. They raise you into the person you are and help you with every step you take. They support you in every way possible. Sadly, we can't ignore that this only goes for most people and not all of them. There are parents that abandon their children and others who simply don't love them. And then there are parents like those of Issei who do. Issei's parents didn't abandon him. Well, his mother didn't, but she didn't love Issei. In fact, she hated the boy. Why? Because he resembled his and her father. He was a mixture of his grandfather and his father when it came to looks, and his mother hated both of them. His hair was exactly like his father's, short, chocolate brown and messy. His eyes resembled those of his grandfather, a rather brownish hazel, piercing and focused. Issei's grandfather was a man who valued money over life. He rented his daughter's body without letting her have a word in it. He took the entire profit and cared poorly for the girl. As long as she looked good enough and always took the pill, everything was good in his eyes. She managed to escape him after she turned 19. One of his costumers wanted her to ride him, and while he was in a bad position, she overpowered him, knocked him out and ran away. After 3 years she met a man in quo, a man who seemed care for her, a man she fell in love with, a man who would betray her. She had a child with him, Issei, before they married, but before Issei was born, the man left his mother, left her behind to rot. She wasn't prepared for that and lost herself in sorrow and anger. Soon after Issei was born, his mother took medicine to stop herself from going away. The medicine turned into a drug. She became addicted to the drug. Then when Issei turned 5, he started resembling his and her father. It brought all the anger she had suppressed all those years out of her, and Issei was beaten for things he didn't do. The boy was afraid, scared that of his mother, and he was too afraid to call the police, too afraid to ask the teachers at his school for help, too afraid to run away. She hated him like she should hate her father. The one man who hadn't used or backstabbed her was her emotional punching bag. Issei didn't saw the purpose his life had. He was on the brink of ending himself, just to stop the torture, just to end his suffering. On his 6th birthday, on his way back from school, he was stopped by someone who was concealed by a hood that revealed nothing more than a pair of boots. Someone that would give him a new purpose. "You boy." A male voice spoke from the darkness of the hood. It was gentle, but powerful. Issei looked at the hooded figure with dead eyes and pointed at himself, his will already shattered. "Yes, you, I have something for you." A hand emerged from the darkness of the hood. It was the hand of a well-built man, but one thing about it was very distracting. It was pale, completely white. It held a necklace made out of a black chain and with a white feather on it. Issei hesitantly stretched out his hand and took the necklace. The chain looked cold and hard, but it felt warm on his skin. The feather was right above his heart. It made him feel complete, as if a part of him had always been missing and now he had a new purpose. He did not know what that purpose was or how he would fulfill it, but he would do so. He was sure about that. 1 year later his mum got together with a man, the man that would ruin Issei's life. He was a gang leader but looked way too handsome and young for his position. His hair was a really dark shade of red and his bangs barely reached his eyebrows. His eyes were bright purple and had a coldness in them. His skin tanned and he had scars everywhere on his body, except his face. His body was well built, but slim, and his smile was one that sent chills down your spine. Issei didn't like this new man. He had an ominous aura around him and everything he did seemed to be with ill intent. What Issei absolutely hated was that the man wanted to be called father by Issei. The headquarters of his gang was in a motel that they owned. It wasn't really a motel because only gang members were allowed to stay there. Issei stayed there. He wasn't beaten anymore by his mother. He never saw what she did, and he never asked. That didn't mean that his life went better. He was given the responsibility to keep the place clean. If he failed in the eyes of a member, they could beat him up for it. His father didn't really care. But one day he seemed to suddenly have developed a great interest in the boy. "Hey brat," Issei looked up from the floor. He was cleaning up some puke from a guy who thought it was a good idea to drink 5 bottles of beer at once. He saw into the cold eyes of the man he called father. His own were dead. He had learned to suppress his emotions. The man he once called father stood alone in the corridor. Most of the gang members were out at this time of day, patrolling or selling drugs. "Follow." His father walked to the basement of the motel, a part where Issei never had been to, the gang's prison. They walked down a long corridor. The corridor was filled with doors. At the end of the corridor was a white door with a graffiti tag on it that said, "Death Row." What would happen behind that door would change Issei. Opening it, the man who Issei called father revealed a man. A man blindfolded with his arms and legs tied to a chair, dressed in nothing more than his underwear and with his mouth stuffed. His skin was littered with scars. "This is an old member of my gang. That fucker thought he could betray us without any consequences. Kill him." Then a gun was pressed into Issei's shaking hands and he felt a knife on his neck. "Don't try anything funny." Issei looked at the gun and then at the man who had heard the conversation. He tried to stand up and get away, failing. 10, immediately releasing what the countdown meant, he got the gun into a proper position. 9, he took a deep breath. 8, he aimed at the man's head. 7. Another deep breath. 6. He closed his eyes, tears running over his cheeks. I'm sorry, he barely whispered. 5. Bang! Issei opened his eyes, the man didn't move anymore. Blood was running down his head, dripping on the floor, a hole was in his head, right between his eyes. The blindfold had slightly fallen off and Issei could stare into the man's dead eyes. Issei had just killed someone. He dropped the gun and sunk to his knees. Good work. Issei didn't hear the words, he was too shocked about what had happened. He looked down at his hands. Those hands killed a man, those hands could kill, and those hands were his. The man who he called father left the room, a sadistic smile on his face. He would come back later to pick up Issei. Issei barely whispered, I'm sorry, silently asking for forgiveness. He once more looked at the dead man. He didn't want to kill him. In this situation the man was already dead. Issei could have thrown the gun away and the man would probably die the very same way. Issei would just join him. He revealed the necklace under his shirt and looked at it, tears in his eyes. He couldn't die yet, he still had a purpose. I'm sorry, it didn't change the fact that he had killed a man. The man in the basement, that's what Issei would call this experience. Sadly, he wouldn't be the only one to die through Issei's hands. The man who Issei called father repeated the process many times. It was like a ritual. Issei would be cleaning up something when his father would appear right beside him. He would be brought down to the basement and a gun would be pressed into his hands, then he just needed to shot whoever was strapped down in the chair. A small part of Issei enjoyed it. That small part was Issei's monster and it grew with every man or woman he shot. It wanted to continue, it wanted to see more blood. Issei never knew he had this side and decided to lock it away into the deepest parts of his soul. If you were to travel there, you would see a monster restricted by thousands of chains, all trying to hold it, but it didn't stop to fight, and it grew stronger and stronger. How he killed also changed. Instead of hesitating and looking at his target, he now shot when he was asked to. His mask wouldn't break anymore, tears wouldn't run down his cheeks anymore, but he still hated it and he still asked every soul for forgiveness. For everyone watching from the outside, Issei turned into a blind killing machine that would kill anything he was ordered to kill. He now didn't need to clean the motel anymore and he got his own room. It got to the point where Issei had his own gun always ready to execute the next target. His reputation in the gang skyrocketed. People didn't want to cross paths with him, they didn't want to annoy him, no one dared to touch him, even though he wouldn't react to being beaten up anymore. The time with his mother and the beatings he had received made him extremely pain tolerant. It was a miracle that he hadn't killed himself yet. He would have actually if it wasn't for the fact that he still had a purpose. Every night he looked at his necklace, it kept him motivated and it was enough to keep him mothing forward. How many had he killed? Hundreds? Thousands? He didn't know and he didn't care, he just hoped that all of them forgave him. But then the day came where his mother made a mistake. The man Issei called father had forgotten to give her the drugs she oh so desired and in response she attacked him. A fatal mistake. His father saw this as an opportunity to test Issei. Another fatal mistake. Issei's door was opened. Hey, brat. Issei looked up from his desk, where his food was, some kind of soup. Issei didn't care. He once again looked into the eyes of the man who had made him a monster. The man was smiling, a downright terrifying look. Issei didn't react. Follow, it's time to prove your loyalty. Issei ignored the words after the command and followed him. He didn't even need to follow his father, he already knew where they were going, and he knew that he would kill another soul. Arriving at the death row room, his father opened the door, like he had done many times before, to reveal something Issei hadn't expected. His mother, strapped down like everyone else he had killed. Some chains on the monster broke that moment. Show yourself worthy, kill her and bang! The man who Issei called father jumped back in slight shock. He had expected hesitation or some kind of plea from the boy to spare his mother. A bond between a mother and her child was almost unbreakable, at least he thought so. He was convinced that Issei had now fully accepted him as his master and was willing to do anything for him. The man didn't even know how wrong he just was. Issei hated him. He hated him for turning him into a monster. He hated him for wanting to be called father by Issei. He hated him for making Issei kill all those people, but he didn't show it. I need to say, I'm impressed, son. The man had a proud smile on his lips. He had created a soldier that didn't question the command, a machine that did what it should do and nothing more. At least he thought so. Issei would have shot her the moment he entered the room. He just waited to see if the man would allow it, and when the words "kill her" were dropped, he was set on ending his mother's life. It was the first time that he didn't ask someone to forgive them. It was the first time he enjoyed killing someone. The man froze, his eyes widened, a fire lit up in the darkness. Issei felt a new energy in his body, burning hot, but comfortable warm. The fire spread. Issei took a step forward. The man who had killed him turned around and looked at the boy who should have been dead by now. Consuming everything in its path, Issei's chest lit up in white flames, as did his right shoulder. The hole in his chest was filled and his arm grew back. Nothing would stop it, nothing could stop it. Issei smiled. A chill ran down the man's body that was strong enough to break someone's spine. It wasn't just the fact that the smile was bloodthirsty, it was the fact that Issei's expression had changed. All those years Issei's eyes have been dead and his face was the embodiment of emotionlessness. Seeing him smile was just wrong. Something emerged from the flames. The ground under Issei somehow caught fire, and that fire quickly spread into the man's direction. He couldn't move, it was something was pressing down on his body, stopping him from acting. It stood, watching its flames consume the darkness that once held it in place. The flames reached his feet and immediately began consuming him. It was painful, he couldn't scream, but a scream wouldn't be enough to show what kind of pain the man was feeling. The creature revealed its wings. Issei's normal expression only returned after the flames had fully consumed the man he hated. The monster inside of him was laughing, it felt alive. Issei might not let it go, but that didn't mean that it could enjoy itself, and this act of revenge brought more than just joy to its dark heart. And it took off, the flames disappeared and revealed what had happened to the man that attempted to kill Issei. Not even ashes remained. Clap clap clap. Issei turned his head to where the sound came from and saw the figure who had given him the necklace all those years ago. So you have awoken. He pulled back his hood, revealing a pale white face of a handsome man with warm cyan eyes and black hair with dark blue bangs bound into a very short ponytail that only reached his shoulders. Issei, or should I call you? A sly smile appeared on the man's lips. Phoenix. Issei's face remained stoic, but his interest grew. Last time, Issei, or should I call you? A sly smile appeared on the man's lips. Phoenix. Issei's face remained stoic, but his interest grew. Don't worry, I'll explain. The man turned around, now facing the Quo forest. He signaled Issei to follow. After some hesitation, the boy did. The man waited until Issei had caught up to him before starting to talk. Where are my manners? I haven't introduced myself yet, just call me Dante. Hearing the man's name, Issei got a little bit confused. Wasn't that the one guy who traveled through the underworld? Yes, that Dante, but there are some misconceptions about my story and parts that were completely left out. I didn't travel through the underworld, I traveled through hell, not the same thing. Anyway, after I went through hell, I met death, yes, death itself, and seeing how I went through hell without losing my body or sanity, it made me the first Grim Reaper. I was pretty proud of that title and thought high of myself, until I received my first mission. They entered a forest and walked down a path. It was a rather narrow path, and you could barely differentiate it from the normal forest ground. It wasn't used in a long while. The mission was to kill the origin phoenix, not the legendary one. I'm going to explain that later down the line. Anyway, I had no option other than to oblige, but the origin phoenix could not die. It was born before death was a thing, so death could not claim it. I knew that if I was to return with empty hands, death would kill me, no pun intended. What surprised me was that the phoenix offered me a deal. I would bound my soul to it, so that I only die when he dies and for that I stay loyal on his side. I obviously agreed, and now I'm bound to the phoenix and death cannot claim either of us. Dante gave Issei a bright smile. Issei didn't react. You're probably wondering what you got to do with any of this. Well, the origin phoenix existed since the universe started, and when you exist for such a long time, it's basically your destiny to make at least one stupid decision. He was stupid enough to make himself require a host. While he had no host, I was on a mission to transport him during a dormant state and find a new fitting host for him, by searching for determined souls. When I find such a soul, like yours, I give him a tiny amount of the origin's power and wait for a decade to see if they can fully awaken it. Issei looked at him with dead eyes. I would call it a deadpan if it wasn't his normal expression. Yes, you were the one I chose to test when I gave you the necklace. You successfully awakened the phoenix's power in yourself and could even use presence, even though it was your first time. That's really impressive. If you're asking why you're so determined, then I sadly have no idea. If you're asking why the host needs to be determined, then I have the answer. They were already pretty deep in the forest. You could barely see the path on which they were walking, and there was no trace of Quo left. You see, the origin phoenix can't die, but its host can. Your life force is now bound to how determined you are to live. If you give up and don't have any reason to go forth anymore, a simple decapitation can kill you. If you are determined to move forward and refuse to die, you still live on even if your entire body would be eliminated. Age won't be a problem. If you truly unlock the phoenix powers in time, you would turn immortal. Time would stop affecting your life force and only your determination would be needed for you to exist. Issei thought about that. Immortality, something he had never considered. Of course, you also got an affinity to fire, but first let me explain what exactly the origin phoenix is. The origin phoenix is technically a dragon. Why? It was born from pure energy. When the universe started, there was a point of extreme heat and energy. That point was the origin phoenix. The legendary phoenix was one of its first hosts, before he put me under his wing. Don't even ask me how he thought giving a bird immortality was a good idea. It did some bird things it desired to do, spread the legend of the legendary phoenix, and died of old age afterwards because it had no reason to life anymore. So the phoenix is a dragon, and that dragon is inside of Issei, no part of Issei. Normally there would be some kind of reaction upon hearing such news. Issei just continued walking, his expression unchanged. So I am going to train you for the supernatural. The origin phoenix is far from the last supernatural existence humans don't know about. Your father figure was a demon, not a devil. A demon, yes, devils also exist, as do angels and fallen angels. Most mythological creatures exist, but the stories around them are mostly wrong, and most, if not all factions of the supernatural will want to get you on their side some more forcefully than others, so I got to ensure that you can defend yourself and, in the process, unlock your true power, so that you don't die in 100 years or so of old age. Well, that was obvious. Issei didn't want to end up as a slave, nor did he want time to fuck with his immortality. My powers are also bound to yours, so I'll also grow in power when you get stronger. I have my own little supply of power that currently makes me around bottom ultimate class, but I can't improve from there until you yourself reach ultimate class or above. Some kind of shockwave came from Dante and turned everything it touched grey. Don't worry about that, I just created a pocket dimension where we could train unnoticed by anyone else. A malicious smile formed on his face. Now let the training begin. Dante summoned stretched out his hand as if he was trying to grab something. A spark lit up between his fingers and ignited into a white flame that grew vertically in size before disappearing and revealing a rod. The rod was made out of a blackish metal and filled with ancient-looking runes that were carved into it. At the very top it got a bit thicker and there was a vertical hole in the rod where you could slide something the form of a sword through. Dante grabbed the handle and the runes around his hand lit up in a cyan color. He seemed to channel more energy into the rod, because now every single rune on the rod started glowing after a second or two. Then a blade came out of the hole in the handle. It had the form of a typical scythe blade but was made out of a white glowing material that seemed to move within the blade. The blade was made out of compressed flames. Issei, still looking at the blade, was a little confused when it disappeared. Then Issei felt his upper and lower body disconnect and looked down just in time to see a foot hit his chest. Now he hit a tree and was stuck halfway in it. Well, his upper body was. His lower body was still with Dante. Never mind, Dante is right in front of him and preparing another swing. Issei stood no chance and was thrown around for the next 5 minutes or so. Was this how it ended? He would just give up in a training fight? Issei refused to go out in that way. His body and mind responded. Time slowed down. He started moving at the same speed Dante was moving. Everything seemed to suddenly slow down. Dante himself didn't blur out anymore to reappear. Issei could see him running. And that moment Issei decided to beat him. His body was enveloped by white flames and regenerated almost instantly. His gaze followed Dante's every movement. His flames spread out over the ground, covering most of the area, ready to strike. Dante leaped at him, his scythe over his head ready to slice Issei apart once more. Issei ignored it and concentrated his own fire. He saw that fire could be compressed into something like a blade and could be used to stab or slice people. He tried copying the move. The flames on the ground grew into a spike-like structure growing into Dante's general direction at rapid pace. The tip was sharp enough to pierce through metal and the heat it gave off was enough to melt the trees nearby. Yes, melt, not burn. Dante barely dodged and had to stop his attack to gain enough momentum to outpace the growing spike. Issei didn't allow him to get far. 1,000 smaller pillars were raised from the direction he was heading to and another big one came from the first pillar itself. Dante tried cutting through them, but Issei was still determined on beating him, and every flame on the ground and every spark in the air started growing and attacked Dante in various ways. Some shot forward at incredible speed and others grew, trying to literally consume Dante. Somehow the Reaper avoided most of them with some magic and clever usage of his scythe, but Issei could see the exhaustion on his face, which prompted him to step it up a nudge. More flames, more fire, more. Dante had his back turned to a wall of fire and was facing another one from the front and all other sides. He was impressed at the level of control the young phoenix had. Most people first needed to learn how to not burn themselves, but this one already commanded every single flame he created almost perfectly and individually. Normally learning how to control all the flames you have while making more took a long time to master, and having two flames make two different things was even harder, but this boy, Issei, did both of them at the same time on his second usage without any visible problems or lose of stamina. It seemed to come naturally to him. That meant that he could be the one who would stay, the one who would truly become the origin phoenix. The thought of something like that happening brought a smile to Dante's face. If Dante wouldn't be so familiar with the Phoenix Flames, he wouldn't have lasted half as long as he did. Other creatures on mid to high's ultimate class would stand no chance against Issei with only very few exceptions. After half an hour of Dante dodging and running, he got hit on the left arm and immediately cut it off. It was better losing an arm than losing his whole body to the flames. Then he felt that his magic reserves were coming to an end and signaled Issei to stop. The boy did so and pulled back his flames. The pocket dimension was a mess. The area where Issei had started with his flame control was a crater. The flames have burned through the earth at that point. The plant life was completely eaten away by the flames and only very few remained at some borders of the dimension. Those that weren't completely burned were literally molten, as was the earth. Thanks for watching. Part 1 is over. Hope you all enjoyed. If you like this video, please do like, share, comment and subscribe.